Good morning. There's coffee chat for June 28th,
Somewhere in
June
there.
28th, somewhere
Sure.
in there. And my name's Christine Waddell, and I am fortunate to have our Member of Parliament
Nice
for
to see you, Christine.
Dauphin-Swan River-Neepawa, Dan Mazier. How much longer is it going to be Dauphin-Swan River-Neepawa? Until
Well, the review is still going on.
the review is still going on.
Yeah. So you want to jump right into that? I
Well,
guess.
let's talk about our electoral district.
Okay.
Let's just talk about
yeah.
that
So
briefly.
in a lot of people aren't familiar with this. The short acronym EDA, Electoral District Association. That's what our electoral district. That's the way ED, right? So inside of that, provincially, you would call them a riding associations, like that. So in that way. So for Dauphin-Swan River-Neepawa, we have that riding is under review. Those ridings go under review every 10 years, right?
Okay.
So the last one was in 2020 or 2012, I guess.
Okay.
So then they started the review in 2022, and they're going through that 2023, and they will become active in April 1st, 2024. The new boundary reviews, and these boundary reviews they're done by a commission. Commissioners are hired specifically. They're third, kind of arm's length of the whole process.
Yes.
Party review. But what it really does give the riding and the people of the riding say and where they belong in the electoral district in that
Okay.
district, right? So it balances off. Like we have some ridings in Canada, there is going to be some changes because populations are growing in certain places and populations are declining in other places. So for this particular riding, so right now, Dauphin-Swan River-Neepawa, the southeast corner is in Rosendale, and the northwest corner is Mafeking, or actually northern shores of Red Deer Lake, I say, on the 54th parallel. So it's 7 hours across. Size of Nova Scotia. What's really unique about Dauphin-Swan River-Neepawa, you can drive to every square inch of it. With over 200 communities, there's 38 municipalities, 14 First Nations, 24 Hutterite colonies, and then over 200 communities. So while it's hard to cover it all, you have to be very coordinated and have a plan of how you're going to touch everybody, or get out to see everybody, right? So we do rely on. We have two offices. We've kind of set the district up in a north and south. So we've got an office here in Neepawa and then an office in Dauphin as well. But now we got Zoom calls, and we can do a lot more visual stuff as well. So that's how we communicate, and that's how we try to get out in the riding during the summers, right? So during when we can really travel around. So that's what I'm doing now. We sit. A lot of people don't know how long we sit in the House of Commons. 160 days, 165 days of the year we actually I'm in Ottawa, and passing legislation or looking and analyzing legislation.
No.
Work right
When we can watch CPAC and probably see things online. Perhaps CPAC is online. We watch it on cable personally, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like it's question period, or they have committee. They have committees sometimes on the.
So as your member of Parliament, I kind of the way I explain this job to people is I live two lives. I have two locations, right? Like so my job, my essential job is I'm a legislator. Like that is my primary job. I go on your behalf, on the constituents' behalf. I go look at different legislation. We debate legislation and laws of the land, right? That is what we really look after, as well as the money, the taxation part of it, and that's where we get this whole hubbub going on about budgets and things like that. So that's really my primary focus. That all happens in Ottawa. So the Ottawa day is usually 8 to 8. It's pretty standard. It can be 8 to midnight, or it can be 6 to whenever. Like but when you're there, it's all encompassing. Like you don't have a lot of time to do. There's a lot of things to do in Ottawa, but the schedule when I'm in Ottawa, that's what I'm focusing on. And then when I come out to the riding, that's a lot about getting out, listening to what people's concerns are. Of course, we've got great staff in the riding too. That information, if you have any problems with, say, government departments, especially immigration, passports, things like that, that's what our constituency office looks after. Like, they're the ones that kind of the eyes and ears in the riding, just making sure that information is coming forward, so we can start working on it as well. So that's part of your representative. I am number one is looking after the legislation and what your voice in Ottawa, but also the other part of it is how, if government's not working for you, like, how can we help with that? So that's kind of the two different focuses that we
two-pronged.
Yeah.
And when you are in Ottawa, there can be some very long sessions either in the House or in committees.
Yeah, so we have, the House sits normally 10 o'clock in the morning, till 6 at night, 6:30 at night. That's a normal day. In that day, you'll see question period. So question period is an hour every day that the opposition gets to ask the government of the day questions. That's our history of that. 15 minutes before question period every day, and it usually happens around 2 o'clock, is member statements. So some of your viewers might have seen me give a member statement. It's a 1-minute statement on anything that I think, like a worthy cause, like Christine Waddell, congratulations, things like that, right? Like, so I've done that. I've done that for our bachelor laureate, I think they're called, like scholarships, like special sports teams, head coaches, citizens that have done kind of rise above and beyond, and recognizing them in the House of Commons. So that's my one member statement. I get those, I think, once a month. And then there's question period. So question period is a show. Don't make no bones about it. It is, and it's turned into a show. But it's also a time, if you take it really for what its serious part of it is, it's the time when the people can ask the government a question. Now, if the government decides not to answer it, what are they hiding? Like, this is what it gets all into. But if you strip away all the theatrics with it, there is a question there, and they should be answering it, right? So that's what question period is. It's you have 35 seconds to ask the question and 35 seconds for them to respond, not answer. If they don't choose not to answer, that's their thing. So that's the way question period works. We do sit in 2 to 4 week increments, so I can be down there for 4 weeks. Sometimes I come home on the weekends, especially in the summertime when the roads are better and that, but it's a pretty crummy drive. If you're going to be in Ottawa for 2 weeks and coming home for basically 24 hours, it doesn't make a lot of sense in the dead of winter, but we do what we can do.
And the government, the legislation, however, allows for you to have, because you are out of Ontario, out of that core of Ontario, you have 2 residences. You have to have a residence.
Yeah,
that is part of
you
your.
have an apartment down there that's all part of you're allocated a certain number of dollars to rent a place, and that's all under that.
Well, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's what you do. But there's things that you're dealing with right now, and I think you've put forward a private members bill.
Mm-hmm.
How did that?
288. Yeah. So private members bill is basically you draw on the whole process is kind of interesting. When we first sit down in our parliament after an election, all our 338 names go in a hat and they draw them out. So you can be from number 1 or number 338, and that in that lottery you get to present legislation that goes through the House of Commons. So just like the budget that goes through the same rigor or different bills that go through House of Commons, you write any type of legislation. If you could write any type of legislation, what would it be? So when I go to schools or when I talk to audiences about this, I ask them, if you could write a law, what would it be? And there's sometimes some really good answers out of that. Like, there's things like one of my colleagues, it was a donor's card, like making it a national standard, so you could just sign off and say, yeah, I want an organ donor card, right on your license, but make it an actual a federal standard. So that came through when I first. It's ideas like that, common sense, like your own legislation, like what would be good for the country. So that's the whole idea around a private members bill. So my bill 288 was around internet service providers. So right now, Yes, very controversial. So right now, an internet service provider can offer you up to speeds. Like, so when you go to buy a package, you can say, well, you can get up to 50 download, 10 up speed, right? Those are the numbers. So a lot of people don't understand the speeds, and I still, quite honestly, at times, like they're different numbers, right? So just here's what they can do. Imagine you go into a gas station and you get up to 50 liters of gas, but you only get 10 liters of gas, but you're getting charged for 50 liters. The internet communication industry is the only industry in Canada that can charge like that. And that's how they're charging your internet service. They might get it to you. They can offer you the service when it works for them, not when it works for you. This is why when you see buffering, like we used to see, especially during COVID in the early days, the system was getting really overloaded. They'd slow the whole system down to keep it decongested, yes, but you weren't getting the service you paid for.
That's when the little thing goes spinning around
yes,
on your
right,
device.
Right. So there's lots of reasons why they've done this. They've addressed this. Similar legislation has been introduced in Australia, UK, and the US is looking at it. So it's time for Canada to pick up their socks. So it's passed unanimously. It went through committee. It's a good process, and I really enjoyed it. I've had all the houses supported, even the government, which means it's very good, and it's sitting in the Senate right now, ready to go off to committee. So it'll go through the same stages of bill review.
So it's been passed in the House.
Yep.
It goes to Senate.
Yep.
And then what
This
does it
fall
do
it
in
should.
and what does it do in committee after? We're
They'll
assuming
go.
it'll
They'll
pass.
debate it again in Senate, and then it'll come back and it'll receive royal assent.
Oh, and then it'll receive royal assent.
Yep.
So
Unless they amend it, unless they do something. This one, there's no reason for them to do anything with. So
and let's face it, every political stripe has ridings in every kind of geographical location where that is effective. They're not all city-centric or all...
Right. This impacts everybody, every citizen in Canada, and it's who uses the internet, obviously. But I mean, it was passed unanimously by the House. So every member of Parliament, and this is the interesting thing about private members' bills too. It's a free vote, so they vote their conscience at the end of the day, and everybody thought it's a very clear signal to the Senate to go, this is important. Let's pass it. So they do their due diligence and get some different witnesses and that, but it is a very clear signal that away it goes.
You just used a term that I'm familiar with, but our listeners, our viewers may not be familiar with. Free vote.
Oh yeah, okay. So you can, well, and I had a totally different perspective of it until I became an MP. Like they call them, when it comes to legislation, so they come in first reading, they just get kind of tabled. Second reading, there's debates, and they can be usually 10 speakers. And that, if you go onto CPAC, besides question period, you'll see us debating bills all day long. So you stand up, you say your speech on the legislation for 10 minutes, and then there's 5 minutes of Q&A back and forth, right? So that's part of debating the legislation. There may be some good points, there may be some bad points, but political points are usually scored. But that is part of our system. So that goes in, then it goes to committee, right? And then the committee kind of has some stuff with it. But before it goes off to committee, there's a vote. So our caucus, the Conservative caucus, has basically what's our stand on it? How's this legislation compared to our policies and what we stand for? So this is where we'll either agree with the legislation, or this is what else could we bring into legislation to get kind of conservative values into legislation. This is where the debates start, right? Like this is where the real controversies and changing the legislation. The whole process is intended so you get all viewpoints put into a piece of legislation. Having said that, I think your viewers are very aware of some legislation that the government just doesn't want to listen, and are very detrimental to especially rural life. And that's why I stand on my head all day long about debating those ones, right? Or opposing them. But a free vote. So once we decide how we're going to vote, say on second reading, to send it to committee, that is, we'll have, as a caucus, so our Conservative caucus will have the whip and our House leader, like the executive of our organization in our caucus will say this is the way it stands. The shadow minister will say we advise to vote in favor or vote, if it's government bills, we usually have it's called a whip vote, but it's a very derogatory meaning. It's like we're voting as a caucus, as a team, right? We're saying this is what we believe in because, and then that's the way we'll vote. When it comes to votes, like free votes, like and private members' bills, the Conservative Party is the only one that matters of conscience. So when you talk about social issues and things like that, those are free votes. Different leaders you'll hear from the Conservative Party say, well, we do free votes on that kind of stuff. So that means you vote your conscience. If you think this is good for your riding and the people you represent, you vote this way. If you vote the other way, those ones actually, and you'll probably have better discussions around them because I'm looking for input, right? So if I do reach up or I do a survey, like I kind of gauge of what people are thinking about certain legislation, and then I go and vote on it.
So those surveys that get sent out through an all box mailer to all that miles of all those communities, you're looking for us to fill them
Absolutely.
out and send them, and it doesn't cost anything to mail them back to
That's
you,
right.
correct?
Absolutely.
That is one, and to send a sealed envelope to our member of parliament.
Yeah.
It goes, if it's to your parliamentary address in Ottawa, that's zero cost to us.
Correct.
And it's
So you're out your time, and if you think, I've had lots, I try to follow up. Like I say, I want to follow up with all of them, but there was one survey, I'm still cleaning up a couple of surveys there, but there was one that was the voting age. That was the one survey.
There was a
unbelievable response to it. Like it was like a record response. Like you send out 30,000 pieces of literature.
30,000.
Yes, you send out to every household. So you go out and you send those. That's what they go out to, right? The voters, and I guess there's 60,000 voters. Technically, you could, but we try to kind of isolate them to the houses, right? But we'll go into areas. But especially the more specialized issue was like we sent one up on crime up at the Swan River, and it was good response there too. So what that enabled us to do a town hall, like really focus on what was going on out there, right? So unless people speak up, and I tell everybody this, it isn't, the community's like, no one knows what's going on unless you bring it forward, right?
Okay.
Like nothing moves unless it's pushed. That's an old political saying, but it is so true. And it's not that we don't want to act on it. It's that we're just not aware. And there's so many other issues, right? So free vote, yes, that is. Normally in our party is your matter of conscience. Like, what do you think is best for your riding? The other ones, like I said, they're called whip votes, but those ones, like, yes, you might not agree with everything that's going on with it and that, but there is a lot of discussion that goes into those before you're say, no, I can't vote. And I've seen it too, like, as well, our caucus, like if you just can't vote for it, like you can't abstain.
Okay,
so you can't abstain.
There is
so there is an out.
abstentions.
And a lot of that comes down to your leader, down to the party, and a lot of how people deal with it. But I'm very impressed, especially being newer to the process. I'm very impressed with how often you do have a lot of say in how you vote at the end of the day.
And as a viewer of CPAC, you don't realize what all's gone. And when we say caucus, the definition of caucus is the elected members.
Conservative members. In my case,
in York, and the Liberals have a caucus.
Right.
The NDP have a caucus,
right.
And that's closed door.
Correct.
No one.
Yeah. Right.
I have a question. Do staffers get into caucus?
Not unless they're invited in by the chair. And like someone will say, the leader will say, well, I have staff in here, chief of staff, those people, but they are allowed to come into our meetings. But other than that, like, it's a vote every time.
And it's closed door. Like, this is in camera.
Yeah.
This is
They're
a
all in
family
camera.
discussing
Right.
an event, and that happens in every political party.
Yeah.
So when you hear the word caucus, you have to be aware.
It's funny, Christine, because I wondered myself when I entered this problem. I said, "What are you talking about? Like, what is that?" But it's basically your team. Like, this is very much a team sport. Like, you're going in. You could call the Winnipeg Jets. They just have it's their Jets caucus, right? Their team is when they have a locker room discussion. That's who's in the
The
room.
media is not in
Right,
there.
right.
The trainers aren't probably in there. It's the players.
Right,
And
right.
in this case, you are elected players
Right.
and
Right.
and chosen
Yeah.
by.
Lots of analogies with teams, team
yes,
sport, and
yes.
and everybody's. One thing I'm really pleased to see, and I can assure your voters that your voice does count, and your voice opinion is very much heard inside of those rooms too, because they're everything is accounted for. Like, it's a game of give and take, but things get steered in certain directions, so you're sitting in a good place.
It was very good to hear that you do get response from those mailers, because you think that's a lot of expense that is part of the process. And every party does the same thing. They have mailers every so often that they're allowed to do. But it is part of the process that everyone uses. This isn't a conservative thing. This isn't an NDP thing. It is overall general. And I think that's what we have to remember when we sit here talking. Our member of parliament happens to be with the Conservative Party of Canada. You go into Winnipeg and there's members from I think there's New Democratic MPs in there. There's definitely Liberal.
Daniel Blakey, Leah Gazan.
Daniel Blakey and
downtown Winnipeg.
And young Mr. Carr has just been elected in his.
That's Liberal.
As a Liberal. So they all actually work together. Like, you know each other and you work together, correct?
Yeah. You more so now. Well, especially COVID. Yeah, we're back to committees is where you'll get to work together. Your committee work, which I haven't touched on, inside of those 12-hour days, there's committees. So I'm sitting on the science committee right now, and those normally will pick on either legislation. They have the legislation. The House will ask you to go and do this study. Remember I said about legislation going through and it gets sent to committees?
Okay.
Well, it gets sent to committees. So there your committee goes, brings in witnesses, brings in the MP that's actually, I had to go testify in front of the industry committee for my private member's bill.
Okay.
So they brought in so that's where the committee's work started, right? So your colleagues are sitting there and asking you questions around this legislation as well. So committee work is another point. That's where you really get a good sense of what people are like, particular MPs. They're supposed to be arm's length, and they're an entity all to themselves, and they're supposed to report back to the House of Commons on these different reports. Supposed to is the word. A lot of them, there's lots of, I'll say politics, but lots of things going on in the background. But the Prime Minister's office, PMO, or the leader's office, like they're sitting in the backgrounds. But I'll have to say, from my experience, again, if you're on a theme that's holding the government to account, because that's our job right now, but you need to get to a subject. Like, we're doing a study right now on Beijing's interference on our research universities, and just how much they're integrated into our universities. Committee decided to do a study on it. I brought it up, very short notice, but I mean, we did agree to study on it, and we're doing something with it. So the committees do have a lot of leeway. Like, they can be animals on their own if they so choose.
Yeah.
So.
And that's where the nitty gritty happens there.
Yeah, and some people go, well, this board work's not for them, right? But it works. Like, I mean, you can make the system. Like, the trick is you hope, and I am one of those representatives. You got to figure out a way to make the system work for us, right?
Now, you just said, which committee are you on? Science. So maybe you've already told our viewers why would you be chosen as on the science?
I guess the science committee. I'm Shadow Minister for Rural Economic Development and Connectivity. That's one of the thing that's But science, I guess I've worked in I'm a power engineer by trade.
Okay.
I worked 17 years at Simplot, now Koch Industries. So science, I went and, when I was with CAP, I did work with quite a bit on the carbon tax, emissions, all that Manitoba Green Plan. I worked with water, so like a lot of the science stuff. And being a farmer, like I worked with science every day. So it was kind of I never saw it kind of coming, but there is a lot of things I still grinds my gears, I guess, is when a politician stands up there and says, well, the science is clear. It's such a farcical thing to say as a politician, but anyways, so that's why maybe I ended up on the science committee. So
Yeah.
clear.
So you have science background.
Yeah.
You have science years of science experience.
Yeah.
So that
And
logical.
especially being as a farmer, right? Like
Yeah.
I get the soil science, I get the water, like I get the balance of everything too. So.
Okay. No, this is like I know our time is limited here. You have another appointment after this at 12 at the most, and our clocks is 11:15 right now. And I know I just saw the time signal from our genius behind the glass. I'm afraid to ask
Don't be afraid.
another question because I know that you are knowledgeable on these areas. This is broadcast out of Neepawa, but is there anything significant happening in some of the outer points? I think of Russell and the mining announcements that were made. Is there federal involvement in that event happening in?
Yeah. So what's really interesting, so you're talking about the potash mine that was just announced here in Russell, which is 20% shared off with Gambler First Nation. So when I was describing our riding, right, 38 municipalities, 14 First Nations, right? What really surprised me as I got into this job and as an MP and just what kind of riding you represent, right? Very diverse, actually. So the 38 municipalities, their governments all to their own. First Nations are governments all into their own. And then you've got towns, cities. They got kind of governments onto their own, right? So, and then you got the federal governments kind of over top of that. You'd be surprised. Well, then we got school boards. Their government's on their own, right?
We get a lot of government.
Yeah, and then we got watershed districts. Their government's on their own. Like they're all elected officials to go in and do. Not so much like publicly funded, not like go through Elections Canada. So how I've tried to do this, especially when it comes, if you apply the rural economic development model onto it, I'm very, very surprised like how we have these First Nations, and they're almost like islands onto themselves because they're federally run.
Yes.
So, for example, say a First Nation wants water. Everybody wants to get drinking water. Everybody should have drinking water, right? Especially First Nations, they've been forgotten. Well, the reason why they're so forgotten about is they've been isolated. Like, so there'll be municipalities in this riding, it happens, 10 municipalities around that all have water, piped in water to their communities, and the First Nations isolated in it. And so I said, so why did this happen? He says, well, we didn't qualify. We weren't eligible. We weren't, and so that's the kind of stuff that's got to stop. And all of a sudden, like me as a member of parliament, like your taxpayers' dollars need to be spent more judiciously, I think, but that shouldn't happen in today's world, right? So we're trying to get caught up with that. Like, how do we do rural economic development as a region, as an area, versus in these little islands, right? So it's been a lot of work, especially when you throw like the last 3 years with COVID into this. Is really the first summer that I've got in my capacity.
I was thinking you went in an election and then COVID hit. Like
first
first year you can do every parade.
Well, I did it pre-election. I was off to a great start, but I still wasn't the city member of parliament. I didn't have the knowledge of committee work. I didn't have a posting, like a government around me. But then all of a sudden we had COVID. So like this year now, I know where files can fit into, where we can get them into committees, where I can introduce them as private members' bills. And interesting thing, like these issues that come up, and even if it is a government bill, and like say they are applying for federal funding, now I know what ministry to talk to or what minister. I can go right across to the House of Commons and say, here, I need to talk to you about that. That stuff happens all day long in the House.
And those are the things the general public do not see.
Oh, yeah.
There is much more teamwork and working together and conversations that go on than question period would make you believe.
Yeah.
Like that's adversarial, that's evasive, no matter who is in government, that happens. But there's people who talk to one another out in the hallways and across the floor that we don't see.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we need to appreciate, that there's just a lot more than meets the eye.
Oh yeah. Like if you scrape away the politics, right? And everybody says, "Oh, you guys are so negative. What's your ideas and all that?" Well, hey, that's not our job right now. We're in opposition, right? But we are entering a time now that we are seeing, the difference in choices between the Liberal Party's policies and the Conservative Party's policies. We're seeing them in spades right now. We have an affordability crisis that I think every one of your viewers
and that's some of the next questions.
Okay.
Like, I don't how much time have we've got
We
left?
got half an hour.
Yeah, half an hour. Do you want to
according to that clock?
Well, if you want to go till
Sure.
we're going to go.
We can't?
Let's go for the hour, because I don't know when I'll get you again. Summer is very, very busy.
20 minutes.
Well,
Okay, we'll just keep on going.
Well,
give me a 5-minute warning.
and then so does our technician. So you just touched on affordability and cost of living crisis, inflation, rising interest rates.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn you loose on all of that and see what you have to say.
So we do have an affordability crisis in Canada right now. I don't think there has not been a person touched by. I look back to, and this is, I guess I remember Trudeau 1, and the policies that were. I graduated in 1985. I entered the job market in a severe recession.
Yes.
And I saw the interest rates. I saw the Liberals' first policy, the first time they tried to address a recession and rising interest rates, like what they did that time, and the consequences at that time very severe to rural Canada, especially to their farming industry. I saw land values. I saw many farmers go to the wayside because there's just too much debt and things weren't affordable. It's the other thing too, there was lots of people throwing the keys back in houses because they're again not affordable. This time around, for whatever reasons, they did pump in way too much. They pumped in way too much money into the economy during COVID. Yes, they needed to do some, but the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, did prove that there was $200 billion spent on non-COVID related issues. $200 billion. Like before the pandemic, they would spend $20 billion, $30 billion in deficit spending. $200 billion in deficit spending. And that's like, how was that, 10 times more?
10 times.
It doesn't go away. And meanwhile, the biggest problem is we pumped a bunch of money out, but there was still only X number of goods around. It doesn't matter. The factories didn't pick up and say, here, we're going to make 10 times more cars, or 10 times more loaves of bread, or 10 times more. Like they had no ability to do that. It was just more money. So what happens is you got a whole bunch more money and the same amount of goods. Well, here, if I can't buy the loaf of bread, I got like 10 times more money, right? I can pay more for the loaf of bread. So off goes inflation. So then the Bank of Canada comes along and says, instead of going back and saying, whoa, we're not going to finance you guys, Bank of Canada says, well, we got to get this inflation under control, so we're going to penalize you now. You've got all this money, so what? Sorry, up go your food. What's different this time, and versus there's no houses. Our housing supply has been basically stripped out of Canada, we're one of the places, we got most places on earth, like as far as a modern industry world, right? And yet we still don't have per capita, probably one of the lowest in the G7. So we're not building houses for various reasons, but when you really get looking at it, is the government's, I don't know what the governments can do with it, but they're affordable. Their housing policy obviously is not working. There's too many barriers to it. There's just to go and do something here in Canada right now, there's red tape is throughout it's just extreme, very, very extreme. And it just starts from the federal government down. So we've got people lining up record amounts. I don't know, I haven't checked the Neepawa food bank, but when we can all grow gardens here. We our rural riding, we're in pretty good shape as far as the food banks, as far as being able to be sustainable on our own. But you don't, I can't honestly say, to try to find a place to sleep, for those people that they can't provide for themselves or don't have shelter, those shelters are pretty stretched right now. And why? When we can't get people to work, and people can't afford, if they are working, they can't afford to buy the groceries and the things that are going on, right? They can't afford to house themselves. So they've really got a lot of different things. Well, as the leader says, they've broken Canada, right? It doesn't pay to work anymore. Like a single mom with 3 kids right now, if she makes over $60,000, she's taxed 80 cents of those dollars. So why would she work over $60,000? We have a system like that right now that has been created in the last 8 years that it doesn't pay to work. And that's got to change. And Conservative government will change that without a doubt.
Yeah, so that it gets the affordability. I know, just you buy milk in the store and every time you go. Now, that becomes an international thing, I believe, because grain markets are commodities, eggs, milk, are marketing boards, and its cost of inputs affects the price, correct?
Grain is one thing, supply management, milk is another thing. The problem is, though, so we've got a policy, the Liberals have this policy called the carbon tax.
Oh, okay, well that's shifting
so that,
over.
But it's affordability. So, and I tried to warn, so I was president of Keystone Agriculture Producers in 2016 when the Liberal government came forward and said, here, we're going to impose a carbon tax system into Canada. I said, so the Manitoba government was tasked with making up their Manitoba Green Plan at the time. It was Pallister government, and I was in the team making up the Manitoba Green Plan.
As
I did
as
warn
chairman or representative for Keystone Agricultural Producers.
Yeah, in agriculture, to make up this environmental legislation in Manitoba. How would agriculture be involved and impacted? So I was representing agriculture. I warned Catherine McKenna, that then the environment minister at the time, that you are fundamentally going to change the way we perform or do agriculture in Canada. It used to be about minimum inputs, maximum output. It used to be that was the main model, right? You produce, but you had to be cost efficient. That's what drove our agriculture model. You couldn't mess with that balance of nature, right? Well, no. This is now how much energy you're using. And then, by the way, you're going to pay more to bring your fertilizer in. So all the transportation costs coming in, anywhere you burn a fossil fuel, you're going to get taxed on it. Because ultimately, their ultimate plan is, they figure if they make your energy less affordable, you will use less of it. Well, you tell that to a senior on a fixed income to not heat their house as much. This is the kind of decision. This is where their policy is headed. This is why we've ended up where we have. This is why your natural gas bills are going through the roof. The market hasn't moved at all, but your carbon tax has gone through, especially natural gas. So then now they're talking about, they're putting on a second carbon tax for the fuel that you burn. So up to 60 cents a liter, just in carbon tax. And is it going to change? You have, in rural, especially rural Canada, we have no other option. It's not like, and they use batteries and they use all this other stuff. There is nothing else. It is, for us, it's about efficiency. Technology, not taxes. Make more fuel efficient engines. Make them so they are producing less false emissions, right? But don't short the whole market and make it unaffordable for everybody. for the elites that can afford the energy, but yet the people that are the working people, that is a fundamental difference between our philosophy and the way we're going to tackle climate change and how the Liberals are tackling it.
And very, very different perspective and set of knowledge on that. And that gets very, very political very, very quickly.
Yeah,
because of the differences in your
ideologically,
policies.
right?
Ideological.
Right, and this is why you have different policy or different platforms and different ideas, right? But it's becoming very knowledgeable now. Canadians, when it comes to the next election, there'll be a very clear, and visible choice.
And those are things that, yes, they are very political. And you can say, well, that's campaigning, but no, it's just this. Look it up yourself. This is what we believe, and it goes both sides.
And the way I look at it, Christine, so when we look at legislation, I always ask myself, what's this mean to the resident of Dauphin-Swan, River-Neepawa, the people I represent? Well,
yes.
How is this going to impact me? So that's what I base my speeches on. That's what I base my conversations on. Here, the Liberals are thinking about doing this. Well, how is this going to impact you? Gun owners. Here, we're going to come after law-abiding gun owners, right? We're going to Grandpa Joe's going to get his shotgun taken away. What do you think of that? How is that going? Yeah.
And
so
it's recycled.
So exactly. So the politics of it is they put it into the middle of our caucus. They put it into the middle of into legislation to see how we're just going to, make it a big controversy, right? And divide. This government's very good at dividing our country. Yeah. I've never seen a prime minister. I don't know why he would run it like this, but I mean, he's very artful at it, making certain groups feel special.
Just kind of hesitate. The First Nations, up at Gambler First Nations, they're part of this mining.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Potash. That's where we started. And the disparity with our First Nation communities with water, but this is an economic.
Yeah. So it's a great initiative. I think they've partnered Manitoba Potash Corp. I think that's what it's called. Greenfield, probably one of the greenest projects, potash projects in North America, for sure, if not the world. Very efficient as well. So they're set up for many years to come. And that helped. I'll have to say my hats off to the Manitoba government. That is a lot of that natural resource development and things like that are in the Manitoba, like the provincial jurisdiction.
Okay, that was probably the.
But again, back to the environment discussion, though. So if the feds wanted to, they trigger something. It's called the environmental impact assessment,
yes.
Right? So this is another thing that this Liberal government has done. It actually has made it way more red tape as well, and they've basically shut down anything related to energy projects, national projects. They just said no. We'll just put it on another source of red tape. So it is good, though. I don't know what the federal government as far as funding is for them on that, but I'll have to say probably the province had more to do with it than anybody else.
The natural resources within the province of Manitoba is
so natural
more
resources,
provincial than it is. There's not the federal involvement, although with the First Nations involved, there'll be some level there.
Yeah.
So. But it sounds like a good news story for the West.
It's very, very good news story, especially for Gambler First Nation and those residents as well, and the surrounding area. Their model is they're partnered with Russell. I would encourage anybody that go look them up on the internet or just go talk to someone in Russell, Potash Corp. There, it's a good news story for something we should be all very proud of.
And it creates jobs. It benefits the whole agriculture industry.
Yeah.
Exports.
Yep, absolutely. It's all sold to potash, and that they've got a very good, strong market, from what I understand. So users, and it's a different type of product as well as not fertilizer. But I do believe we got to wrap up. I'm getting signals here like crazy.
We're gonna push it, and we're gonna drive really fast up to Arts Forward afterwards.
Okay.
This is one of, not really
I'm giving
fast.
you the 5-minute warning. I do have to go.
Okay.
So.
Well, We'll fill it. We'll fill it in with a piece of music. So private members' bills, cost of living and inflation, and the rising interest rates, and it's hard to tell where it's going to go next. There's a question that I don't know if your office or my supervisor suggested, the Blue Seal policy proposal.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so right now we've got the Red Seal program across Canada, right? So if you're a trade,
Okay.
you can go and weld anywhere you pass one ticket, and you can go and weld anywhere in Canada. Like you can go Alberta, like out East
Yes.
Coast, right? That's carpenters, same idea. Those are all
You hear
Red
the term
Seal
Red
program.
Seal carpenter.
Red
yes.
Seal, right? So but there's no such program for professionals designations. So if you're, and this is for our immigration system, like especially here in Neepawa. So if you're coming from, say, the Philippines, right now you have to go apply to the province. You apply to the province of Manitoba. There's a test, and you can practice the doctor being here. If you want to go to Alberta as an immigrant, you can't go do that. There's no national standard for that. So what we're proposing is a Blue Seal program. So we're emphasizing doctors and nurses right now because there is a critical need for them, just
Yes.
for people, right? So a standard. So if you're somewhere in another country, at least you would know the national standard. If you pass that test, you would get an answer back in 60 days, whether you are qualified to come into Canada. First of all, like, here's your proficiency. Yeah, you passed, and then you go in and start working. That would be as easy. So the health authorities know what they're dealing with, and the people of the communities that know what they're dealing with, and they're tested in the way they go. There's no more, we got to wait for the provincial body to approve it or anything like that.
A question, because we have a national healthcare program, it would seem logical that would be a national program, but it hasn't been. It's each
correct.
province has their college of physicians
Yes.
and their level.
Yes.
Anecdotally, I've heard of people who are, in this case, I think it was a nurse, and if they went and practiced in Saskatchewan for 6 months,
Yes.
or it was substantial length of time, then they could come back in where their spouse lived and practice in the province of Manitoba. Is that something you're at all?
Well,
have you heard it?
so
This
I
is
know-
anecdotal.
Yeah, so we're looking at is the professional designations, right? So we're gonna there's engineering, there's accounting. This applies to all. Like we're looking at all professional designations.
Okay. Oh,
So
okay.
there is a national standard right across. So if an accountant wants to go work in rural Manitoba versus downtown Alberta, did he have to pass the jurisprudence? I don't know, but I mean, we're going to look at each professional designation, so those barriers are taken away. Part of the reason we're looking at this, right, that labor is becoming very fluid in the world,
Yes.
and really, right now, Canada's really setting itself up. We're behind the times. Like there should be some kind of, everybody should know, especially our Canadian residents, should know that you should be able to work anywhere in Canada without not having to go past a different test.
Yes.
But we'll deal with we're going to do nationally, but once we get the national standards set up, I think it will be the same for, if there's any barriers like that for a Canadian citizen, those will be removed at the same time.
And
At least that's my intent
Yeah.
with it as we
And
get into
some people may not realize there were all kinds of trade barriers from province to province
Oh, yes.
on all kinds of commodities.
Yeah.
And it's getting past that, so that prime example, selling beer that's made in Manitoba to
Yeah.
the Alberta market.
And those are still alive and well as well. But
And-
I mean,
and-
we do have to deal with those as well.
But I mean, the
this is one of the
professional
labors.
and the labor issue, it's good to hear they're dealing with it, because
We are.
w-
The other
We'll-
ones,
we'll-
we'll see.
we'll see. There's just a lot going on.
Absolutely.
And your schedule going forward for the summer? Now,
There you go.
what are your next
this
few
is, yeah,
stops?
so to wrap things up here, we are definitely headed off. We are doing different barbecues this year. We're doing our passport clinics again this year. We do have, like I said, there's an area of Nova Scotia to cover with over 200 communities. Definitely follow me on Facebook.
Okay.
Please like don't. And if you don't follow me on Facebook, email us and we can get you onto a
Okay.
newsletter. We're continuously always working on that. Fill out the surveys. Don't I am of the opinion, or I try to be proactive. I am very much of the opinion that it's better off at least me knowing you, or we have a relationship before stuff goes bad, and you really do need the system, right? And then if I don't know you from a hill of beans, like, there's always that,
Okay.
right? So I do try to get out and get to know people, or at least be aware of what's going on, right? So this is part of this. This is all outreach. This is what we're doing. But I mean, I've got a great team around me. I couldn't do this all by myself.
Okay. You have
so we've
2
got
staff in Manitoba, regularly, your office,
3.
3. Oh,
Yeah, and 2 and 3 in Ottawa, I guess.
okay.
Yep.
We're
Summer
we're,
student
we're going
and
to try and
summer-
sell you a nice little ad that can go on NACTV that has your contact information.
Okay, sure.
And
yeah.
and that way we can
Brenda can get that
contact
for you. Yep.
your offices, and
Absolutely.
and certainly we can email you out to mail. Okay, I got a question.
Oh.
Back up.
Okay.
If I want to send you a piece of hard snail mail
Yep.
to Ottawa, and you're in Manitoba, what happens?
Well, it goes to my general mailbox. Like it's Dan Mazier, Member of Parliament. It ends up in Ottawa. There's a letter sitting on my desk, and away we
but
go.
do you have staff to look after that?
Oh, yeah,
While
yeah.
you're
Yeah, year round there and there.
oh, okay, year round.
Yeah.
How many staff do you have in Ottawa?
2 full time, and then a summer student or an intern.
Intern.
So
Okay.
3.
I know the intern program has been very, very solid
Yeah.
over the years.
So that's another. If you're a graduate and you're looking every spring of the year, we do have a conservative internship program. It's you get to live in Ottawa for 3 months. It's like a summer job. We do pay for it, and you learn all about our political processes here in
Okay.
Canada. But it's from the Conservative Party side.
and they do, and all the parties
yeah.
do that.
If you do send us an email too, I know we have it's kind of a standard response, like especially if you're right now we've got it set up. So if you are having troubles with immigration, there is certain information that we need.
Okay.
So those are the kind of things, like don't be surprised, like we're going to need more if we're going to engage you,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
If it's just a policy question or anything like that, well, that's no problem at all. I'll try my best.
And immigration
phone
is
back.
one of the top things for all members of parliament, I believe, from ones I've talked to over the country, which we've
Yeah.
had the opportunity to do. Immigration is a real key issue for that.
It's funny. There's a lot of people thinking it's just an urban issue, but it's so much more a rural economic development issue. More so, I think. I think the impact's even greater. So, but
Anyway, I appreciate that you were able to squeeze time out today. I know you've got at least one more event today, and
Yep.
maybe more. There's still people you
There's
probably want to see
4
when
more?
you're in this community. And you said something about a barbecue, which it'll be over by the time, but you
Sandy Bay on Thursday.
Oh, Sandy Bay on Thursday. Well, they'll
Yeah.
treat you well.
Yeah.
Oh,
First time
yes.
we're going out there to kind of set up and do this stuff. So we're going to be.
Okay.
Should be exciting times. It's our
Wow.
first kickoff for the season.
Kick
First
off for
barbecue.
the season. Well,
Yep.
we appreciate you taking time. Thank you to your timekeeper over there. It cuts NACTV short just a little, so we're going to rely on Jeremy to find a filler to go in after this, because you are on time constraints,
Okay.
and we're coming in this
Yeah.
morning because you had 2 or 3 stops before you
Yeah.
got here.
Yeah.
Thank you for all your time.
Thank you, Christine. This has been very good. Yeah.
Oh,
We'll do it
it's
again.
just absolutely amazing. This has been our Member of Parliament for Dauphin-Swan River-Neepawa, and Dan Mazier. He's available, and and you know what? Every Member of Parliament goes through a similar thing. Those downtown ridings in Toronto are not easy to serve, because you got people in high-rise towers. Here,
Yeah.
at least you can see where you're going. So we're grateful for that, and grateful for the work you do and your team, and to all people who are willing to put out their time and put their names on ballots.
Oh,
Not an easy thing to do. So we'll close with that. I know we're short the hour, but thank you very much. So keep watching NACTV. I think we're going to have them back. It might not be
Absolutely.
me in
I'll be
this
back.
seat, but he'll be in the hot seat. So we're looking forward to that. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Christine.
And so thank you, Jeremy. We'll wrap this up. Christine Waddell for Coffee Chat in Neepawa, Wednesday the 28th
There you go.
of June. Thank you.